Team House with your hosts, Jack Murphy and David Park.
You found your way to get into the shit eventually.
I sure did. It wasn't but a couple weeks after that. I was back at that border checkpoint. We got rocketed. Checkpoint was really small, and we got, I want to say, I don't remember exactly, but I want to say it was like 20 some odd rockets in a, it's a tiny spot. I mean, you basically just sit back near the mountain and just assume that the elevation of the mountain is going to stop them, and you're watching rockets land 100 yards away and just, exploding.
And how long? And so you guys didn't have at that point any HESCOs or any kind of, and I mean,
Nothing.
Like the standard digging fighting positions on those types in that type of terrain is unbelievably difficult.
Yeah, no, at first we didn't. We ended up later in the deployment when we were doing those transitions. We stole some HESCO from FOB Salerno, and we took that down there and basically created a makeshift bunker. But that was later in the deployment.
Yeah.
At this point, it was still that tarp, and we just move away from the tarp and kind of move so that the mountain was in between you and where these rockets were coming from. Yeah. They were all coming from this same kind of hilltop.
Yeah.
And it was hilltop 2911 or 2911 or whatever. And that's by the elevation, 2,911 meters, which is about 10,000 feet. The mountain stood above everything else. And when we finally got up there and you look back, you're like, oh, wow, you can see, absolutely the entire battlefield from this mountaintop.
Right.
So after we got rocketed, we went up there. And I get up there, and we're doing kind of an assessment and we found some little places that they were using to set up their rockets and stuff. And so I'm just kind of patrolling this area. And I hear, hey, we've got some, I get the hand arm signal, enemy right here, whatever. It's like, okay. And now it's on. And so I put my guys in, we make this hasty ambush position. It was a great spot. We kind of, the way the trail was, it was sort of a drop off. And then there was like the walking trail path underneath us. And I was like, I'm going to obliterate these guys when they come. We're just going to be plunging fire on them. There's nothing they can do. So I'm ready to go. And I'm waiting for this enemy patrol. And I see one of our Afghan guys, one of our Afghan soldiers, the company commander of the Afghan forces, walks into my kill zone. And I'm like doing this, like, get out of there, get out of there. I'm trying to do hand arm signals to get out of there. And he gives me a thumbs up. And I'm like, no, not thumbs up. Like, just go, man, get out of there. And then he turns around and he spots them and he fires a burst. And of course they disappear. So now it's like, great. So I'm like, hey, troops in contact. I don't know exactly what's going on, just that I'm in contact. So stand by. And, we chased them a little bit and they crossed the border. So 2911 was right on the border. Half of the mountain was in Pakistan and half of the mountain was in Afghanistan. And so we get to the border and we got to stop. The way the rules of engagement were, we couldn't chase anybody into Pakistan. So we stopped on the Afghan side and they knew our rules of engagement. They ran for a while and you could see them. And at one point, the one guy stopped running, and he turned around, and he waves at us, and he keeps walking. And I was like, man, that son of a bitch. My squad leader, that guy that I told you about, he was trying to shoot this guy. And I was like, dude, that's more than 800 meters, man. Like, it's beyond the maximum effective range of your weapons. I'm going to hit him. He's trying to shoot this guy. We found a video camera, and it had all kinds of intel. You could see them reconning our positions. Saw myself, saw other guys, and their guys, and then there were some surface to air missile type stuff that they had. And so it was like, okay, these guys are, they got a lot of equipment here. We take that, pass the intel back. And then that night we see lights on that mountain. So somebody must've got back, and I can imagine the conversation similar to how ours would be with the private, like, hey, where's the camera? Right. So I think I might have left it on the mount. So,
So it'd be company online.
Yeah.
Company online. Drag the mountain.
Hands across the mountain, with their flashlights looking for this thing. And so we shot the shit out of our 105s as soon as we saw that. So the next day it was like, okay, let's go do BDA, battle damage assessment of this stuff. So we go back up there. I think it was 9 guys with me, and we're kind of walking the path. I had a couple Afghans and an interpreter with me as well, and we're sort of following that same trail, walking the trail, and looking to see what we can find. We can see where we've hit, where we've missed, that kind of stuff. And at one point, I looked down at my GPS, and I was like, I guess at this point, we're far enough removed years-wise that I can tell the whole story, which is that I realized that I had crossed the border. Okay, so the PL is the first one to notice that we have crossed the border. So I call a halt, and I was like, "Hey, we crossed, and we're in Pakistan." And that squad leader was in front. And honestly, we were just kind of following the trail. That's his eyes were on that, not so much on the GPS. And he looks down, and he's like, "Oh shoot, you're right." And we're having this conversation. The Afghan guy is like, "No, Afghanistan." And I was like, "No, Pakistan. Like, we've crossed." And I was showing him on the thing. And I was like, "See, that's Pakistan, Afghanistan. Us, we're in Pakistan." So we're having this conversation. And I hear something, and we kind of look up, and we see this patrol kind of crest a mountain in front of us. And they were walking, had their AKs at the low ready. They had the band of, mags with them. And there was 4 of them. And they were in traveling Overwatch formation, right? Like, they're actually moving. That was the first thing I remember was like, holy cow, that's what we look like when we patrol. And they're doing their hand-arm signal things, whatever. And so now I see that, and I was like, okay, we're doing ours. All right, here we go again. This time it's for real. And I know I'm across the border, but here we go. This is the situation. And as I'm trying to set the guys up, our interpreter carried an AK. He charges his AK. 10,000 feet in a third world country, large, loud metal clank.
Right.
Yeah, immediately. The dude just kind of stopped, and he looked over, and we're like made eye contact, right? And the squad leader, he had his ACOG up, and he's like, he's looking at me, he's pointing at me, can I shoot? And I was like, yeah, shoot, and he shot around, hit the dude right in the head, and did like the, arms go out, he falls down. The Afghan that we were with, he was a former Mujahideen fighter. He takes a shot, hits the dude in the hip. The guy grabs his hip and then fell over like a rack, like one of those marionettes. Like, you just let go of a marionette. That's what it looked like. And then the fighting starts, right? So my first thought, I look over, and I was carrying a radio that day as well. And I look over at the RTO, and I was like, oh, actually, I wasn't carrying a radio that day. But I look over at the RTO, and I was like, did you call our grit? He goes, yeah. And then he goes, Bravo 6 wants to talk to you. So I pick up the net. He's like, Bravo 3-6, why the fuck are you in Pakistan? and I was like, Roger, sir. He's like, get the hell out of there now. I was like, okay, got it. So it was like, okay, we need to break contact. We're going to move back, and then we can regroup and fight. In my mind, we're still fighting 3 dudes. I just killed 2 of them. There's probably a 5-man team. I was like, this is nothing. We're outnumbered them 3-1. Like, we're good, So we make our first bounding movement backwards. And then all of a sudden, like, the world erupted. Yeah. And this is not 3 guys. Like, this is a lot more than 3 guys. This is guys on my left. This is guys on my right. They're in front of me. Like, this is just bullets are flying absolutely everywhere, in every possible direction. And this is just, what are we talking about? 12, 13 seconds, right? You bound 2 fire teams back, and we just bounded. It wasn't very far. It was like, 50 meters. And now all of a sudden, they're right on top of us. And you could, when you're in a fight like this, it's hard to describe, but you can feel who has momentum.
Right.
It's not an objective thing. You just feel it. You're like, it's on my side or it's on the, and they had the momentum. It just, the pressure, the superiority of fire, because we were bounding, we're not shooting, we were moving backwards. And so we just gave up that ground, and we were already starting to get tired. And so now at this point, when the fire starts really getting intense, it goes from, I was planning on stopping and having a defense on the border to, I don't know that we can fight this. Like, what's going on? So it's like, okay, artillery, right? Like, this is the first thing I'm going to do. Get on the radio, nothing. I can't get anybody. Nobody's answering my calls. And, we're like on the ground, right? because you're trying to, you know, bullets are whizzing and zinging and passing and explosions. They're throwing like grenades, and the grenades are blowing up. They're getting caught in these like thin pine tree, you know, stuff. And so they're blowing up overhead, and like, you know, branch and stuff is falling down. Dirt's popping up all around. Can't hear shit, you know, and I couldn't get anybody on the radio. I was like, okay, well, I guess we got to keep going up, you know. At one point I tried to like stand up with the radio. RTO hits the ground back down. He's like, fuck no, you know. And so the squad leader is like, dude, where's artillery? It's like, I'm trying. I've got no radio comms, man. I'm like, okay, you know, we're going to keep finding our way backwards, you know. And so at this point we start to realize like they are enveloping us almost completely. They have moved now. Now the bullets were kind of coming at an angle, and now they're coming like straight up, almost behind me. And so I told the RTO, I was like, you know, keep moving up. The terrain's blocking us. We got to keep moving up. Meanwhile, we're bounding this team. The squad leader's got one team, and I kind of have another one. I'm sort of in between the two. I catch back up with the RTO. The other thing about all of this is that we have so much weight on us.
Right.
We've got, and we had the full-on IBA with the neck piece and, you know, the Kevlar stuff. And then we had, we did the Army thing. We did all of the stuff that it says in the Army. You got the Camelback and the 3 magazines and, you know, like 210 rounds of ammunition, which you're carrying. And things changed after this fight. But in this particular fight, we were dressed the way the Army requires. And so heavy. And I remember, like, I feel short of breath telling the story because that's how I was. Like,
yeah.
There was no oxygen. Like, we could not speak. And I remember I was walking, and I thought, like, as I'm looking down at the ground and watching the dirt pip up from rounds, thinking, you need to run. And I just physically could not. And guys, I'm fresh out of Airborne and Ranger School. Like, I was in great physical shape. I couldn't. I just physically could not run. I was walking. And so I catch up to the RTO, and I was like, I kind of look at him. I was like, you got comms? And he just shook his head. Like, we couldn't even speak at this point. You know, it was just, you know, hand arm signals basically became our main source of communication. We couldn't speak. And so I pick up the radio and I put it to my ear. And when I do, I hear 3-6. This is Bravo 6. If you need additional assets, you got to let me know. And I was like, oh, here we go. The tide of this fight's about to change. You know, I'm excited. And I was like, roger that. You know, polar fire mission over, right? Like, I'm ready right now. And I let go of the net and I hear, this is Bravo 6. If you need additional assets, you got to let me know. And he let go of the thing. I was like, oh, he's just repeating it over and over because he couldn't hear anything from me. All he got was, I'm troops in contact. He said, get out of Pakistan. Now we're silent.
Right.
In his mind, he's just lost the whole, you know, all of us. We're all gone, right?
Right.
You know, why would you go 30 minutes without any communication, right? So at that point, I tell the RTO, I was like, look, dude, go all the way back to the trucks. Trucks were at the top of the mountain. There was a road that went all the way to the top on the Afghan side, but you had to park there, and then you could only walk from that. I said, go put this thing on a power ramp, call fire on this spot right here. I was like, we're not going to be here by then. The enemy will be here, and I want you to call fire everything right here on this spot. And he kind of nods his head, and I pick him up and push him. And he starts moving, and just as soon as I did that, I hear a call for a medic. And it's like, we don't have a medic. I didn't bring the medic with me. The medic's back in the truck. And so I stand up, and I was like, who's hit? And they're like, no, he's ambulatory. And I was like, okay, good. And as I said that, okay, good, I kind of look over, and this dude had popped up the way we were kind of on the side of a mountain, and I had a fire team shooting. And this dude popped up basically behind them. And I saw him. He hadn't seen me yet. And he was behind the platoon on the way this ridgeline was. And I could see the look on his face. He was like, oh, I got a whole 4 guys. Like, he was excited, right? Also, we were close enough that I could see the look on his face, by the way. So this is, I mean, they were right on top of us. And so I turned, you know, and I'm breathing super hard. I turn on fire, and it hits right in front of him on the ground. And he turns and he looks at me. We make eye contact, and he goes to raise his weapon. I'm already here, bro, you know. And I start firing again, and I could tell I was missing. I'm trying to adjust fire as he's running now, and I managed to stop hitting the rocks in front of him, and he ducks down behind the mountain. I didn't see him again. Don't know if anything happened out of that. And so now I was so focused on that dude, and I was standing up because I had heard the medic call. I've basically just been standing and firing, and everybody kind of spotted me.
Right.
And so I had one round, and it came like right in front of my face. It was so like I felt it, like, you know, that's where I got my one up, you know, like, yeah, I'm on life number 2,
right.
You know, and, you know, so I kind of fall back. I hit a little pine tree behind me, and then another round came straight at me, and it hits the tree, and the bark kind of smacked me in the face. And I did one of these and looked at my hand, like, did I just get hit?
Yeah.
And then it was like, I stepped outside of myself, and I was like, hey, get the fuck down. You know? So I dropped down to the ground, and, you know, I kind of spotted where these guys were coming from. I emptied a magazine into one, emptied a magazine into the other spot, wait a couple seconds, nothing coming my way. I stand up. And when I stand up, me and the squad leader meet up again. He's like, 105's like, you know, I can't, no radio, man. I'm going back to the trucks. And we're having this conversation, and like a flurry of rounds really come close. And Sergeant Miller managed to get his hands on a law rocket out there, which I don't know how he did. And every time he fired one, he always managed to get his hands on another one. He never told me how he got it, but he had it. And he turned around, and there was 3 guys behind this rock. I think the arming range on that law is like 16 meters, and they were about that far away. And he got down. He says, backblast area clear. He knew I was right behind him. We just were talking. So I like hop over to the side. He fires this thing. It hits that rock. And then let me tell you, gentlemen, the whole firefight stopped. Both sides. Everybody just stopped for a second. That thing went off, and it was like, that was right in the middle of everybody. You know? That shit was close. Oh, sorry. You know? So yeah, so we keep fighting back, and, you know, this is the first time I get to see the casualty. And Private Smith was on the ground, and he was shooting, and I thought he had been hit in the hand, because every time he shot, blood was skirting out from his hand. And then he stood up, and he put his hands on the ground, and when he stood up to move, it was like a water faucet out of his face, just blood pouring out of his face. I was like, oh man, that's not good. Because I was looking at him from that side, and he turns and he looks at me. This whole side of his face is all kind of swollen. And looks at me with the other side and smiles and winks, like, I'm good to go. You know, it's like, hey man, go back to the trucks all the way. He's like, nah, man, I'm here with my platoon. I'm not leaving my squad. Right. Like, okay. You know, we're running low on ammunition. These guys are starting to get close. Now, by this point, the tide of the battle, you could feel we were sort of equal. You know, it had gone from them overpowering us. Now it was a little bit more even. And
it's because you brought a law to the gunfight.
Every grenade we had been thrown by this point. The law rocket had been thrown. I mean, we had fired so many rounds, so we were running dangerously low. Sergeant Zimmerman was our team leader. He grabs a saw, and the way the trail was, it kind of came to a point and then went around this rock. So you had to make almost like a hard turn. And he's like, hey, everybody go behind me. He did this Arnold Schwarzenegger kind of like holding the saw and just like hip firing this thing, fires 200 rounds, almost melting the barrel, you know, go, you know, everybody goes running. And we get back to the trucks. And by that point, you know, I finally make the radio contact, you know, and Bravo 6 is like, okay, what's going on? I was like, there was a lot of dudes, like, it's bad. He's like, well, where are you? Give me an ACE report, right? So I'm pulling the ACE report, and I look at Sergeant Miller, and I was like, you know, how are we on ammo? He's like, we're black. And I was like, how black? And he points at the saw with a magazine in it. He's like, it's fucking black, right? And I was like, okay, got it. I understand what you mean. There was a case of 203 rounds in the back of the Humvee that somebody had not unloaded, and they were pulling those open and just firing them down the trail to make sure the enemy couldn't follow us down the trail. And so, you know, that was the first kind of like really difficult decision. It bothered me for many years, but, you know, I've got no ammunition. There's nobody in support. I kind of lost contact with the enemy at this point. Don't have control of the Afghan forces. I know they're around here somewhere, and I feel like trying to make contact with them is going to be a visual contact thing. I don't want to get shot.
Right.
You know, they've been listening to us fight now for hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever it's been. And I've got this casualty, and Private Smith is starting to go pale. You know,
Right.
He's starting to struggle. So I was like, okay, we got to pull out, right? And that bugged me for a while. It was like, okay, they won the day, right? That's how I felt. But I had given up the terrain. I wasn't there, you know. I
You've
just
given
had
up
to retreat.
Pakistan.
What's that?
You've given up our position in Pakistan.
82nd Airborne platoon leader rewriting American foreign policy right there on
Right there.
what is it called? The Duran line?
Yeah, it'd be the Fernandez line. Well,